Hey, welcome back, Modern Math Teacher. Today is bittersweet because it is our last poolside PD of 2026. Let me tell you guys something. Poolside PD is a little bit exhausting for me. I'm recording twice as many episodes each month, but it is a labor of love. I truly get so inspired to talk with you guys and share these ideas with you, and I hope that you love Poolside PD as much as I do. If you do, could you go ahead and make sure you leave like a rating or a review for the podcast, and go ahead and text me some ideas you have for what we should do next year. Maybe there's another book that you want to dive into either throughout the school year or next summer. I know the book studies were both pretty popular this year. We did Productive Struggle and Math Therapy. Happy to read anything else alongside you guys and give you my thoughts and reflections on how to actually use them in real classrooms. Because I think that's one of the most important things is that, like, I am an actual classroom teacher. So I am really excited to get back to, 4 to 5 episodes each month because it is about to be school again. And so my life is about to be crazy. In fact, I was just in my classroom 3 days last week getting it set up. I've got 2 days this week of meetings and professional development, and then school starts for me next week. So it is bittersweet that Poolside PD is coming to an end, but I am really excited to be here with you guys, and I'm so glad that you've been here with me all summer long. All right, let's get into today's episode. All right, so I want to ask you guys a question today. When you're planning tomorrow's lesson, next week's lesson, whatever it's going to be, what is the very first thing you think about? Okay. Maybe it's, I need to cover solving systems, or I'm going to need to finish lesson 3.2. Actually, if you're on lesson 3.2, you are listening to this way into the future. Okay. Maybe it's something like, I need something really engaging because this class is right after lunch and we're going to need a pick me up. Right. And all of those are like completely reasonable, normal places to start. Right. And in fact, that's how so many of us have planned for years. You open your curriculum, you look at tomorrow's lesson, you think about the activities, get your materials together, make your slides if they're not already made for you, print your worksheets, right? Run your copies, whatever it is you need to do. And then you're like, oh, cool, I've got tomorrow planned. But, in doing that process myself, I've realized somewhere along the way that that's the wrong first question because I wasn't actually planning the learning, right? I was planning the activities, and that's totally different. So I don't remember like one specific day when this shift happened, but it was more like hundreds of little moments that have built up over my 16 years in the classroom. Whether it was a student, lesson that my students loved, even though it wasn't particularly fancy, or a really great activity that, designed and looked beautiful, but totally flopped, like mazer tag. Maybe it was a discussion that took a wrong turn and went somewhere like I totally never expected, or a project that my students still remembered and talked about months later. As I reflected on those experiences, I noticed something, right? These lessons that the students remembered, they might not have always been the most creative, and they weren't necessarily the ones with the coolest tech or the biggest projects that we did, right? These were the lessons where the students experienced something. Maybe they changed their mind, had a mind-blowing epiphany. Maybe they solved a problem that they didn't think they could solve. Have you ever done a locker problem with students? Seeing them solve that for the first time is so cool. Or the ostrich llama problem, chef's kiss. So great. Love it. Maybe they had a debate with a classmate and really, come to terms with like, am I right? Are you wrong? Can we both be right? Is there one right answer? Or they made a really surprising discovery that they didn't think that they could have made. Maybe we just had a really good time and we were laughing, right? Or maybe they struggled and then everything clicked and it was that light bulb moment for them. Those are the things that they're going to remember, right? Not the slides that I'm creating, not the handout that I'm giving them, the experience that they had. So that realization has changed how I begin my planning, right? So before I start thinking about the activities and the pacing and what it is that I might need to print out, I ask myself a question. What experience do I want my students to have? Do I want them to experience productive struggle? Do I want them to notice a pattern? Do I want them to debate two different solution paths? Do I want them to realize math can describe something in the real world? Do I want them to leave feeling, more confident than when they walked in? And once I've kind of thought about and answered that question, the lesson can kind of start designing itself, to be honest, because now every instructional decision has a purpose. Okay. It's not just choosing an activity because it's fun. It's choosing something to create the experience that I'm hoping my students will have. And that is a very different way to think about planning. So let's say tomorrow tomorrow's goal for you is that solving systems of equations, right? You could start by asking, okay, cool. What materials and resources do I have? Which worksheet should I use? Or you could ask yourself, what do I want my students to experience while learning systems? And maybe it's that you want them to realize there can be more than one way to solve a problem. Maybe you want them to experience the power of comparing different strategies. Maybe you want them to discover graphs, tables, and equations all tell the same mathematical stories in different ways. Now, notice what's happening there. The math isn't changing. The standard isn't changing. Your curriculum isn't changing, but your planning question is. And that one question is going to change everything else. Now, side note, the ostrich llama problem is so great for this. I love that one. So go find it. Raul and Esteban, and they're counting ostriches and llamas. I'm sure there's a million other ways that you could customize it, make it a little bit more relevant for your students if that one is not it for you. But that's what I love doing with my students. It's so good. It gets them talking, it gets them laughing, it gets them drawing, it gets them comparing different strategies. So good. So good. All right. But okay, so let me get back on track. So here's some of the things that I notice is what's going to change when you're planning experiences instead of planning activities. Okay. When you start planning around an experience, instead of planning around that activity, you make different instructional decisions. Okay. Instead of asking, like, ooh, how could I explain this better? You think, what can my students discover for themselves? Or instead of like, how quickly can I get through these examples because we have other things to get to, right? You ask yourself, where should I intentionally slow down to let the learning happen? Thinking back on our rigor conversation about how many problems, instead of saying like, how many problems should my students complete? You're asking yourself, how will I know they've really made sense of the idea from the lesson? Do you hear the difference, right? We're not changing the math there. We're changing the lens that we're planning from. And here's something I really want you to hear. When I say learning experience, I am not talking about elaborate month-long projects or full PBL. Honestly, you guys, some of the most meaningful learning experiences in my classroom have been 10 minutes or less. Maybe it's a notice and a wonder. Maybe it's an anchor activity. Sometimes it could be a which one doesn't belong. It's a quick estimation activity before we calculate. It could be so many of those things, right? None of those things are going to take weeks to plan. They don't require special materials, but they can completely change how our students are going to experience mathematics. That's what I'm talking about, okay? It's an experience. It's not measured by its length. It's measured by how intentionally it was designed. So when I'm planning, it looks a little different now, right? I start with the math and the lesson. What do my students need to understand? What is the purpose of this lesson? What do I want my students to experience? Do I want them to be surprised? Do I want them to notice a pattern? Do I want them to wrestle with an idea before I step in, right? Do I want them to collaborate? Do I want them to realize they already know more than they think they do and they can actually probably solve this on their own? Right? After I've answered those questions, then I can start thinking about the activities that are given to me in my curriculum or that I've got from somewhere else, because activities are really just the vehicle. The experience is the destination. So that one shift can really change the way that you're designing lessons, especially if you're working with, maybe a curriculum that you don't love so much. Design with that in mind first, see where your curriculum or your resources could enhance that experience for you. Now, I want you to think back on your own experience as a student. We're going back in the past. We're putting our student hat on. I bet there's basically no worksheet you remember doing. Just going to say it, right? You don't remember lesson, 4.3 from your 8th grade math class. But I bet there's moments you remember. The teacher who believed in you. The day something finally clicked with you. The project everyone talked about, for better or worse, right? Talk about my geo project. That was the worst, okay? Maybe it's a time you solved a problem that you didn't think you could solve, and you finally had that moment, right? Those are learning experiences. And that's exactly why I believe they matter so much, right? Students rarely remember anything we teach, or everything we teach, I should say. But they absolutely remember how the learning made them feel. And that's where I want to tell you that we aren't simply covering and delivering content, right? We are creating moments that change the way students think about mathematics, and sometimes how they think about themselves, right? That's that little bit of math therapy sneaking in there. So before you go, and you plan out tomorrow's lesson, try changing one question. Instead of asking, what activity should I do on Tuesday next week, ask yourself, what experience do I want my students to have? And that one question is going to naturally influence everything else. It's going to influence the questions you ask, the discussions you facilitate, which examples you choose, when you're going to pause your class, the place where you're going to let your students struggle just a little bit longer. Okay. It's going to change the opportunities you create for your students to think, to notice, to wonder, to connect. That is intentional instructional design. So if today's conversation resonated with you, I want to make sure you remember that I have that free resource that walks you through that planning process. It's the Gold Standard Project Planner. But don't let the name fool you. It is not just for projects. It is a planning framework that starts with the student experience and works backward from there. Because whether you're planning a 5-minute warm-up, a 2-day lesson, a 2-week project, I believe the same planning questions can apply. And you can download that for free at morethanjustx.com/project planner. And of course, I will link it in today's show notes. Now, before I let you go for today, for our last poolside PD, even though it's raining here in Michigan right now, I hope you're out enjoying the sunshine. I do have one question to take with you. When your students remember tomorrow's lesson plan a year from now, what do you hope they will remember experiencing? Activities are memorable, right? But experiences, those are transformational. Oh my gosh, you guys, thanks so much for spending your day with me, your summer with me. Poolside PD, like I said, is my favorite, but it is exhausting. So starting up back in September, we are back to once a week episodes, Tuesdays only. If there's any topics you want me to share about throughout the school year or throughout next summer, any books you want me to read, please shoot me a text. I am happy to get them. I can even respond to you now. We can have a quick convo. It's very cool, okay? So keep thinking about what it is that you want to be designing in your classroom. Keep thinking about how you can make those learning experiences come to life for your students. And as always, you guys, keep it real.